Hello, everyone.
Radiant heat.
We're going to get the meeting started. So it is 5:35, and we are going to open public comment for 30 minutes. So I'll set a timer, and if anybody would like to have public input for the next 30 minutes, you are welcome to do so. We're going to get started with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay, do that.
Okay.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for coming tonight. We've got a packed agenda, so I'd like to dive right in. And the first thing on the agenda is reviewing the minutes from 7:25 and 8:19. Does anybody have, well, do we need to formally approve them?
Yes,
Chris?
we
Okay.
are a function of the board, so we would approve those.
Okay, so we'll take the first one first. Does anybody have any comments or edits for the 7:25 meeting? Okay. What about the 8:19 meeting? All right. Good with those, Chris?
Just need a motion and a second. and then-
Okay.
No.
Make a motion that we approve the minutes for both meetings.
Second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye. Great. Passes. Thank you.
All right, and now we're going to turn it over to Mike Davies. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah, we
Okay.
go to Mike. Hey,
All right,
how are
Mike.
you?
I'm well, how are you?
Good.
Is it okay if I share screen and I
Yes,
have a quick
please.
PowerPoint?
Please do. We've got you up on the big screen, so we'll be able to see it there. We may just need to move right here so we can catch it on the camera. We got
Okay.
feedback from the community last time. We had the screen over there, so they couldn't follow along. So that's why I've got the camera printed so they can follow us.
Yep.
Perfect. Watch your toe.
So I can't see anyone besides Paul and Chris, but I assume there's more than you guys there, so hello. So I was asked at the last meeting to provide an update, to provide a little more detail on the budget. And so first of all, I just wanted to give a quick timeline of how we got to this point, and then I'll jump right into the budget, and I'm gonna try and move that over there. Can you guys see this okay, where you're at in terms of the PowerPoint?
Yeah, you're good, Mike. Go right ahead.
Okay, so and I don't have the exact date, but this process has been more than 4 years, where Stratham selected EEI and Banwell to do a study of the building and a needs assessment. At that time, we started with, and I think it was 2019, with kind of a very granular, detailed list of all the things that we saw that were wrong, from handrails to HVAC units to flooring, finishes, bathrooms, etc. And we did a study, and then COVID happened and it delayed things. We focused on ventilation. And during this initial selection, the Stratham school board members, facility directors, administrators, they toured some of the projects that our team has done in the region. So EEI and Banwell have renovated all the elementary schools in Portsmouth, New Franklin, Dondero, and Little Harbor. And then we also did a major renovation with some new construction in Newmarket. And so those were kind of baseline for buildings that had been not touched since the 1980s for major renovation, and maybe standards of where we said, okay, we use cost per square foot with inflation on what we did in Portsmouth over the last 10 years to say, okay, to bring those buildings up to Dondero, Little Harbor, and New Franklin, this is what we would do to the existing building. Then we met with the staff about some of the programming needs. What Paul's brought to my attention is 2019 was a different political climate, a different budgetary climate, so there's been a lot of construction inflation. There's been an increased pressure on local taxpayers. So the things that we were looking at in 2019 may not be fully applicable in 2024. But the budgets that we're going to share with you tonight were constructed by using the Portsmouth as a baseline and some of the new market projects as well. And then really looking at your needs and then doing cost per square foot analysis on how to get the school in Stratham to look, be as functional and energy efficient and as the schools in Portsmouth. So that was kind of how we got there. And then the additions were using square foot budgeting from very recent projects, including Newmarket, but also including Allenstown, which is the most recent state-funded project, and trying to say, okay, doing an addition would be in this level to try and get a target project budget and a target scope that your taxpayers would be willing to support and would meet the needs of. So although we have some breakouts, I do want to point out that we've still been at the stage where we're waiting for the go-ahead from this group or the school board to say, okay, we really want you to focus on this, really dive into the numbers beyond the square foot metrics and tell us what you need to do. And I think that is where we're at now. It's been about a 5-year process, and we were waiting for that direction. I think the March elections, we saw bond votes fail across the Seacoast region and here in the central region. So I think the voters were sending a message with some of the bond votes that failed and some of the budgets that failed that maybe need to be understood. We think there might be a long period in looking at what the right scope, size of the project may be. One of the things that we want to make you guys aware of is a lot of your lighting is fluorescent. We believe lighting rebates will be phased out over the next 2 years in New Hampshire. They're already gone in Vermont. They are already dwindling in Massachusetts after this year. New Hampshire is a little bit further behind, so we do think that going from fluorescent to LED, you only have a 2-year window to still get incentivized to do that. The boilers are sectional cast iron boilers. So since this process started, the EPA has increased the efficiency standard on boilers, and cast iron sectionals no longer meet that efficiency standard. So the new boilers like that are being made less and less. And getting a section, it can take a year to get a replacement section for some boilers. So for those reasons, there's a little bit of urgency around potentially upgrading the boilers. It could last another 10 years, don't get me wrong. But if you do have sections break, it's harder and harder to get parts. The HVAC controls are a Siemens proprietary system with pneumatic backing. So that's a system that's been pretty obsolete since the 90s. So in my mind, there's the space needs, which is very important, but you also do have some infrastructure concerns, which are pretty near term. I think in Wyndham, right as we speak, they're replacing their cast iron sectional boiler, which is newer than the one that you guys have. They couldn't get parts in time, so they had to do an emergency switch to propane. If you had a system fail in the winter, you'd most likely be wanting to stay on oil. Luckily, Wyndham's failed in the spring, so they could switch to propane. Propane is a much cheaper fuel than oil. From a big picture, we used cost per square foot pricing based on the Portsmouth projects in Newmarket with some inflation. And to renovate the entire mechanical system, boilers, ductwork, upgrade the entire 80,000 square foot building, we were, with the inflation adjusted cost from Portsmouth, it was about $225 a square foot. That also includes roofing, fixing the siding, replacing the windows. So this is not just an interior renovation, but includes the roofing, windows, and the panel soffit details that we talked about. New construction, we're using an allowance of $375 a square foot. We had talked about a 24,000 square foot addition. The cafeteria was about a 3,200 square foot addition. We had a $1.2 million allowance for site work, which is pavement, detention ponds as required, any sewer piping for the addition. We had $300,000 for relocating portables. We had a contingency of $1.5 million. And then contingency is for, I know most of the group is aware of this, contingency would be for some unknown expense or risk that is not known when we start construction. The COVID pandemic, the war breaking out in Ukraine causing inflationary price, or you find out you had a bunch of asbestos that you didn't think you had, or something that was unknowable that the construction and team couldn't forecast. We typically throw a contingency allowance at a project like this. I know there's a lot on the group that understand that, but others who don't. And then soft costs, this is a budget which is 16% of the total project. We've seen this range anywhere from 10 to 25%. This includes the architecture fees, but it also includes testing as required. It includes furniture. It includes IT equipment. So those soft costs are generally things that aren't related to the hard costs are usually your building, your concrete, your ceilings, your HVAC, your boilers. Soft costs might be anything that the school wants. It includes design, and then furniture, equipment, IT, etc. all goes in that bucket typically. I did get a feeling that 38 may, and I don't want to claim that any member speaks for the whole group, might be more than some are looking to spend. And so then I wanted to provide a path to bring the budgets down. These are my first passes at what you could do. So the roofs, although we've seen some leaking in the roofs, we do believe that they have 8 to 10 years of useful life left in them. So again, we never knew when this project was going to be brought to the voters. And so when we started or even if it was going to be brought to the voters. So we wanted roofing to be identified as a need. I do think there's an argument for, doing some repairs, putting the new HVAC, but trying to get more life out of those roofs that we think have 8 to 10 years of life. The windows, so we had all new windows in this $38 million allowance. You could put an energy or security film and just leave the existing windows, and that would save $800,000. The cafeteria addition is 1.4. Redoing the elevator was $300,000. We had $350,000 for a canopy or main entrance allowance. One idea I had is rather than doing this 2-story classroom addition, potentially doing a 4 classroom addition only, which would provide some breathing room, but maybe not meet every programming need. And something like that would take that $9 million addition down to $7 million. And so those are just my first pass at, okay, what could we take out of this as some thoughts? And that would take 12 million out of it. There's probably further you could go. I do want to point out that in the $18 million allowance, which is the interior school reno, it's all the existing buildings. So if you did no addition and you just wanted to fix everything in your existing school and do the roofs and the windows, that was this $18 million number. All the additions, including the canopy, are part of the $9 million or the $1 million addition here. So inside your building, we have $16 million allocated. I got to move the little Zoom window here. I broke it out, and I won't go through the line item by line item, but I tried to break out. This includes the HVAC. It includes all new electrical panels, electrical service, new fire alarm, communication wiring. We included all new doors in the school. So if everyone's like, hey, we think we can just keep the doors, we had replacing all new doors and hardware, interior and exterior, all new roofs. We had spray foam insulation, metal panels, 400,000. We had all new cabinets in all of the classrooms and main offices. So that's about $800,000. The only thing I would caution this group, this whole thing is really budgetary. None of this is meant to be, hey, let's pick this list and okay, we got to 10 million and that's the project. This was really meant to be holistic and then, cost per square foot analysis and then approximations of what we're carrying in those and where that money would go. Someone had brought up the bathrooms, so the plumbing allowance is $300,000 and the rest of the bathrooms are in the flooring allowance. So this flooring allowance, which is down here, where is flooring? 900. So that includes all the flooring in the school, including the gym flooring at like $6 a square foot. And then at the end of the project, we have a payment and performance bond. This is a guarantee that should our company or the selected company go out of business during the project or come in some massive hardship, an insurance company would complete the project for that fee. There's also a builder's risk insurance, which is some additional risk. I've also carried 800,000 of escalation risk. So that's the idea that some of these costs, if they don't go this March, they might go the following year. So we have some allowances for escalation.
Mike, can we interrupt you just for a second back on that detail?
Yeah.
So let's just pick on a couple of line items. So your roofing, you have at $1.7 million for the existing building only,
Yeah.
right?
I can't hear very well.
I'm sorry, you have $1.7 million for the existing building only, right, on roofing?
He hears you through the computer, so you may have to walk to the computer and speak into the microphone at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah, yes.
So you have roofing at $1.7 million for the existing building only, correct?
That's correct, which
And
is
what-
$21 per square foot, which is
what-
increasing the level of insulation from what you currently have in all new roofing.
You said, what is it per square foot?
$21.
So what is the footprint of the building?
82,000.
No, 82,000 is the total square footage, including the second floor.
Oh, that's correct. That's correct.
So the
Yes,
footprint,
you are.
footprint is what?
Yep. No. Good.
40,000.
Good point. So we you're right. That should take into account just the second floor.
Okay.
You're right. Yep. No. Good catch.
And what are you contemplating on the electrical at $1.3 million?
So there was a desire to do a generator, a full backup generator was one of the original projects, and then also upsizing the service to include dehumidification. So currently there's no dehumidification. So it was a new electrical service with generator. And then also generally when you take down all the ceiling tiles, you're redoing the lights, and so it's a full, replacing sub panels, adding a generator, replacing sub panels.
Is a generator required by code?
No.
Yeah. I don't think it's $20.
The question would be, and this is more for your group.
At $20.
Does Stratham have a good emergency shelter, and is that something that would be desired on this property?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I mean, what other facilities are available in town that would have backup power? But again, it's probably too detailed to ask what's the size of the generator you're carrying.
So I don't know the size, but I believe what we were asked, and again, by the way, keep in mind, this was kind of high level concept. The idea was to back up the entire building. It was a full building generator.
Yeah, that's probably,
I don't recall
in
the
any
size.
case, we'll move on.
I'd say that's something we want to consider later.
Yeah, we don't need to back up the whole building.
One of the things that I wanted to bring up is that a lot of schools that we work with do sort of enabling leases or leases to deal with the infrastructure. So you can't, a bond, anytime you're adding on to the building, you're required to do a bond, which requires a 2/3 or 3/5 majority in most towns, and it's a pretty heavy lift. The state of New Hampshire allows lease projects to have a simple majority. We got a quote. Stratham could get a lease if you execute it today at 4.275 as a tax exempt lease. We got a recent quote for 15 years. And what that would enable you to do with a lease quote is something like do LED lighting, get the $75,000 in rebates, do a $380,000 to go all LEDs with dimming controls, $25,000 a year in energy saving, replace your oil tank with 4 or 5 1,000-gallon buried propane tanks, put in new propane boilers, high efficiency, sized for future expansion, repipe the boiler room, and patch the pavement. So we thought that would be about $700,000 and save $20,000 a year in fuel costs. Replacing all the pneumatic controls and the Siemens system with all new valves, and that was somewhere around $650,000. Replacing all the ventilation equipment with rooftop, Daikin, energy recovery, dehumidification, and insulating the ductwork, installing steel to support, and then patching in the roof is something like 2.6 million, and the electrical service to upsize that for the dehumidification, I have at 300,000. That does not include the generator in this price. So something like this is 4.7 million and would save 56,000 a year, and could potentially finance over 15 years, have a $427,000 budget in the lease budget with 56,000 of energy savings to help offset it. Or if you just did 1 through 3, which is the lighting, the boilers, and the controls, it would have something like 165,000, and you'd still get most of the 56,000. So I brought this up because this would be a nice sort of stepping stone project. It's not a panacea. It would get you off of oil. You'd get rid of your 20-plus-year-old boilers. You'd get the LED rebates where they're still available. You could still debate how big of an addition you could need for a while. You could upsize the electrical service for future, and then potentially upgrade all the ventilation to do dehumidification. And we do projects like this across the state. Every year I do about 3 or 4 of these. They almost always pass. Very conservative towns, very liberal towns. They sort of like packages like this. And if there's something that you felt strongly about from this list, you could kind of pull it forward into this list. But that's one option to kind of get the ball moving. Then I just had some rough breakout budgets on the additions, which I had 8 million I had 9 million at $375 a square foot for the classroom additions, and similar pricing for the cafeteria. And I would, we work for you. I wouldn't overly focus on my cost per square foot breakouts, because it's really, and I had talked to Chris briefly. Some of these budgets could be a little high, but I would much rather be a little high at this point in the game than while you're still thinking about what you want to do, than be, razor thin and then risk. Like Wyndham in 2008 passed a high school bond, and they were too low, and they had to go back to the taxpayers midway through construction and ask for a bunch more money. And EEI has never had to do that. We do $100 million a year in northern New Hampshire school construction. We try and be a little conservative at this point and have a little fluff, than try and be razor thin on some of these pricings. That being said, I also think they're fair budgets. I don't think they're crazy high. I think if you Google cost per square foot in northern New England, this is right in the middle. It's not. Burlington is doing in Vermont is doing $600 a square foot. We're right under where Rochester is building right now as well. So, I know there's a lot for you guys to talk about, but I didn't want to just send this off blind. So I appreciate Chris kind of letting me do a quick overview of these numbers. And I guess I'll stop sharing unless if anybody has any questions. If not, I can sign off, because I do know you guys wanted to talk somewhat privately, but I wanted to at least do a quick narration through that.
Does anybody have any questions for Mike before he signs off?
I do. Paul Perino. You had monies in there for dehumidification. You were including the entire building, correct? All 82,000 square feet?
Yes. Yes, any ventilate, like there might be like boiler rooms that have no ventilation, but any occupied space, including the gymnasium, includes dehumidification.
Right, I mean, not facility space. I mean, you have
Not
ventilation
facility
and facility
space,
space, just exhaust ventilation. using secondary air or something like that, but you're basically dehumidifying, providing some comfort to all the spaces, including the cafeteria and the gym.
Yes, yeah, every ventilated space. I will say, if you're trying to cut costs or cut, well, I don't know which one to use. In Manchester, they asked me, when they saw the budget, they said, just do it for all the classrooms. And they had me cut dehumidification for the gyms and the cafes and the libraries. So that budget, the 2.6, is all regularly occupied space.
Yeah, oh, thanks. Thank you.
On the HVAC numbers with structural steel, have you checked out the roof joists? If we do rooftop units, or are you contemplating rooftop units? And if so, have you looked at the structure and determined that we need structural steel reinforcement? Or am I misunderstanding that?
Yeah, yes, we have looked at them, and yes, it's not that the bar joists necessarily can't support them. It's just that our structural engineer, anytime we put these relatively heavy units with dehumidification, he wants me to support the load of the curb itself. So even if the bar joists have plenty of capacity, he wants the weight transferred through angle irons, typically, to the bar joist, and so that it's uniform loading. And we've, like I said, we've done, we had our structural engineer back in 2019 look at this, and at the time, right now the units are very difficult to service, so it was my recommendation to go to the rooftop, and then he had come up with a very preliminary sketch on supporting them.
Okay.
Paul Perino, once again, what unit did you select the manufacturing unit to base your estimate on? A manufactured unit.
Daikin Rebel.
Okay, that's an ERV unit, right?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so,
So would that have multiple indoor, would that be refrigerant piping inside with multiple?
No,
Or
no.
it's
So
just an air handling?
basically, the way it would work, the duct right now you have these units above the ceiling, and they might do on average eight classrooms. And what we would do is we'd remove the unit from where it's located, put the unit on a spot on the roof, and we've actually done a preliminary design for where we put them. Because at certain points, this project had more momentum than at other points. So at one point, we started going down the road of designing this a few years ago. So we put them on the roof, ducked down to where the essentially interior unit was that's now demoed, and then we provide dehumidified air from the rooftop down. So all the refrigerant is going to be on the roof as part of the packaged Daikin energy recovery unit. So when I say dehumidification, and I know you have a PE on the board here, what we're doing is we're providing cool air to those 8 classrooms from the rooftop, and we're controlling to an average temperature or to a return temperature. So, in some office building, every office has a thermostat, and there's like what's called a VAV box where everyone can get pinpoint control. This is not that. This is everyone in those 8 classrooms are going to get cooler air, but there's going to be one thermostat that's controlling it. And so this is kind of it's not pinpoint control, which is what you typically call an air conditioning system, where it might be a VAV system where every single classroom has a VAV. This is everyone's getting cooler air. We've done this in all 22 schools in Manchester and have had very positive results from this system. But there are more expensive systems that you can do that would provide pinpoint control. Some of those systems would mean, and we did that at the new Franklin School in Portsmouth, and I'll explain why. If anyone's familiar with that school, it's right off the highway, right off 95. And so they don't like to open windows in that school ever because of the highway right there and the noise and the traffic and the smoke and all that. So basically Portsmouth wanted to pay for full VRF system in every classroom in addition to the ERVs. And that's quite a bit more money than this system,
So
where you're
the-
getting ventilation and dehumidification in one unit.
So it's not a VRF system, it's a packaged rooftop,
It's a
just
package.
made by Dakin, who happens to do a lot of VRF.
Correct, that's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So the electrical service, did an engineer look at the electrical service? Does that need to be upgraded if we're sticking with, propane boilers and basically rooftop units?
It's, my understanding was yes, but I will say, we talked about this in 2019, and there's been gains in efficiencies in fact, the guy that did the study no longer is even in the industry. So to give you an idea how long this has been kicking around. So we could relook at it, but at the time we were told if you were to do dehumidification, it would require an upsize, but we could relook at that with the current selections. I will say too, at John Stark High School in Ware, they wanted a dehumidification everywhere, and we told them, hey, listen, you have 12 units. If you do all 12, we have to upgrade your electrical service. If you just do all the classrooms, you don't, and skip the CAF or something. So if you were adverse to spending that $300,000, I'm sure there's quite a few units we could get in before we would trip that.
Well,
that
yeah,
requirement.
yeah, I mean, that's probably the one number that's low. I mean, with that, that probably doesn't include the utility back charge. But that's new switchgear.
Yep. Yep.
So if we didn't upgrade the service, we would need to replace the main switchgear?
Yep.
Okay.
Did you look at,
I mean, what I'd be looking for this group is to say, hey, is there any numbers you'd really like to contemplate for this fall? And then between now and then, I'd really dive into those. Whether it's the 18 million or the 4 million or nothing, or just the boiler, because these are high level, and we would dive deeper into anything you'd like me to.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
so basically, what you're recommending is a standard, it's a ventilation unit, or it's going to, actually it's going to provide outside air and return air. It's going to dehumidify, as well as heat with your standard hot water heating. And it's going to have either a heat wheel for energy recovery or a heat pipe. Is it going to have your standard economy cycle as well, or is that going to be it?
You get that?
Yes. So we'll have an energy wheel is what we usually do, and it'll have economizer as well. And then the new units, and we could certainly tour. We've just done 20, like I said, 20 plus schools in Manchester where we've done this exact unit. They're pretty impressive, and they have hot gas reheat as well for dehumidification.
So you're not even using your hot water when you're using dehum?
Yes, from the boiler.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
I did have one last question.
Oh.
Did you look at power factor? Do we have to have power factor correction in Unitil?
I will have to relook at that. It may have been something that come up. I don't remember us looking at power factor correction.
Because we may
Let me
get
look.
penalized if our phases are our real power is not near unity.
Yeah, I could look at that. I can look at that. I don't recall looking at that, to be honest.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Great. Oh, no. All right, lots of good information there. So I think the next part on our agenda is Luke. Do you want to take it away for your
Sure.
proposal?
Can I stand up there and do it?
Yep.
Yes?
Yeah.
So, not used to this in the public sector, so when I saw the presentation, I immediately thought of what's the historical use of the building and how it was originally built and what do we have now. So what I'm used to in terms of what I do is reuse of existing space wherever possible with its current use. You try and maximize that effort. So, and I alluded to that in the last meeting. I actually pointed specifically to what I thought were kindergarten, or they used to be kindergarten rooms, the 1,000 square foot unit rooms. So that was the genesis of where this came from. So next slide. So I said, okay, what are the objectives here? To provide Kate and the school with most or all the educational needs that they've been asking for. Obviously, this has been going on for 4 or 5 years. They needed them then, they certainly need them now. So as fast as possible, how do we provide them, but how do we do it on the most cost-effective approach, right? Next slide. All right, that's all right, I hit it. What are our obstacles? Time. We've got to get to the bond issue in March of 2025. In my opinion, in the private sector, what we almost always do is you have a three-legged stool. You have your client, you have the architect engineering team, and you have a construction expertise. You have that third leg of the stool. And I think we've been missing that. I don't know if you've had people like Chris, like Dan, like Paul, on school boards or in committees, but it seems to be that what has happened is you have the client architectural relationship and the cost check and balance really hasn't been in that. And that's just not what I'm used to. So it's a different approach, but I'd like, what I'm going to be recommending is in short order, trying to bring that construction expertise, not just the committee, but actually hiring a pre-development or construction manager. I know that's what Chris's firm does. I'd like to see him stay on the board, but interview some construction management groups to bring that third leg of the stool in. Another obstacle has been, and I've been told by Paul that he informally polled the school board at your retreat as to what the appetite was to go to the public for $300,000 to $500,000 in order to get 75% construction drawings, and they said zero appetite for that. So that's another obstacle. That would be the traditional way in order to get a guaranteed max price. You really have got to get into that detail if you can. And then obviously a high degree of confidence going in for in that short time period to go to that March bond. Next. Right? Yep. So the way I looked at it, I broke it into two pieces. I said, let's look at it in terms of the redevelopment and then new building, okay? And reuse, maximize the reuse of the existing space. Okay, this building was originally built for K through 6, not K through 5. There are 5 classrooms for each grade. That's 35 classrooms, excuse me. I didn't see any wall changes, so I'm assuming that original structure is still in place. Is that right, Kate? That structurally, I know the uses aren't 35 classrooms today, but the structural is basically intact, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So in the last plan, as Kate went through that, we need, according to the current plan, we need 34 classrooms, and we have 35. I know they're not perfect, they're not the ideal size, but the idea would be, let's reuse wherever possible our existing space for the existing space. Banwell's plan calls for 11 new classrooms. That's a third of the classrooms that we need. So we're going to use 34. They're looking to rebuild 11. I don't know how you, again, I'm thinking, I don't know how you make money doing that. I don't know how we optimize the taxpayers' dollars by doing that. So My thought was reuse as much as you can, keep the classrooms in the existing building. Bifurcate the plan as a renovation plan for the existing building, and then a new wing addition for all the special services and the teacher breakout room, workspace, and copy room. And then as soon as possible in September, hire a third-party pre-development / construction manager to balance out the current dynamic with Banwell and coordinate the construction plans, cost estimating, and bid process. And there are a lot of groups on the Seacoast. Chris, you probably know 3 or 4 or 5 off the top of your head, probably.
Yeah.
And I know your group does it in based in Massachusetts. Next slide. Backing up, I think the enrollment study probably drove a lot of this. And I asked Chris for an update. If you look at the enrollment study, here's the historical, and kindergarten and first grade are really the key entry, right? And that's what the enrollment study really focused on. Here are the projections of the enrollment study. The good news is they were projecting 105 in kindergarten in 24, 25 here. Good news is right now, we're looking like about 82 students. So whatever that is, 18, 20, 23 fewer kids coming into kindergarten this year than what the enrollment study originally called for. So at least for this year, unless you see a lot of people showing up over the next week, pressure's off of Kate and the staff because they saw this coming and it was a tidal wave, and that would have scared me too. So good news is, at least for a year, that pressure seems to be off. And it looks like we're going to be at 503, which is really close to last year and in line with the last few years. So I just want to put that in perspective too, that the enrollment pressure seems to be off a little bit, at least for a year. Next slide. So what I did was we received 4 or 5 pages of a lot of data. It's clear that Kate and her staff went through a lot of detail to get Banwell all of the different space needs. It was too much for me, so what I tried to do was simplify the space needs in terms of area. So this is the classrooms with bathrooms, 34 classrooms totaling 32,400 square feet. Our existing is 28, but half of that difference is the 2,000 square feet that are in preschool. They're out in temporary boxes. So we need, in a perfect scenario, in terms of the ask, an increase in class sizes, about 2,000 square feet difference. And these are the increases in art, makerspace, and music. And then the next page, next slide, is the other spaces. So I tried to group, I don't know how I made it twice, but I tried to group the spaces by general category, right? Core, and I think Banwell did the same thing with Kate. So you had special services, core, administrative support, et cetera. And I tried to look at the differences, and I tried to say, okay, in this, if we can live with the 35 existing classrooms and that 2,000 square foot shortfall, right? Because the classrooms aren't ideally sized. If we took the rest of this, special services, the teacher break room, 1,300 square, that's the combination of break room, workspace, and copy room. If we took those specialized spaces, what if we took all of those and built a 2-story wing instead of a classroom wing? So the next slide. So I looked at the existing building and I said, okay, let's reuse these classrooms as classrooms. We'll need, in order, if this is pre-K and kindergarten and first grade, we'll need to add bathrooms there. We'll need egress doors just like we have here, but those are existing there. Bathrooms are existing here. Do the cafeteria expansion. This is the old teacher break room, sorry. break room, move facilities in there. What's missing in this plan is art and music. No storage is added there, so maybe you add storage when we add the cafeteria expansion. You expand the learning center up, and we have one extra classroom, so the makerspace is here and here, which almost perfectly matches the makerspace need. I guess they're doing a kiln or something in addition to that. So it's about 900 square feet there and a little less there. So guidance and administration stay the same, except for, I believe, their special ed administrator, special ed administration and director is here in the corner. I combined that need with, into the special services area with all the special services or the special ed assistants or teachers. And so you pick up an extra office here because the nurse was in short supply of space there. So second floor. So guidance and math, the math tutoring matches, I think, the 400 square feet that's there, that was asked for in third, fourth, and fifth grade is on the second floor. I believe where this 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, somewhere in there, that's where the makerspace currently is. And I just made a note, rooftop units, and do solar panels or what have you. So the existing building stays basically the same. There is some internal wall area that's changed in order to give the math tutoring and guidance on the first and second floor, individual offices or whatever they're doing, or more open space. But the square footages match what was identified in those categories. So the next slide is the floor plan for the titles of those spaces did not show up. Do you have the PDF of what I sent you?
I got a paper copy here.
Huh?
I got a paper copy.
Does everybody have a paper copy? All right, I'll just read it out then. I want everybody to really see it. I'll read it out. So this is the teacher space. This is a teacher break room, work, and copy. I didn't subdivide them out. This is women's and men's rooms. Sorry. So women's and men's rooms this is the first floor. So this is the teacher area. This is so that is 1380. So I'm 2 square feet under the ask. This is Sun and Stars. 688 square feet, so it's under by 92 square feet. This is literacy, 1,206 square feet, it's under by 84 square feet. This is BCA Calming and Zenden at 1,470 square feet, it's under by 130 square feet. On the second floor, here and here is occupational therapy, totals 1,560 square feet. It's under by 100 square feet. This is speech at 780 square feet. Again, men's and women's here. Speech is 780 square feet, down short by 1,800 square feet. And this is the special ed area, including the admin and director, and that's at 1,800 square feet, and that's over by 37 square feet. So I got really close. This is 68 feet by 80 feet on the first floor, and this is 68 by 68 on the second floor. 8-foot corridors, 30-foot wide areas. Now, I didn't go into detail because I don't have it, how many offices or conference rooms or group rooms within each of the needed spaces would occur.
Can I take that for a second?
Okay, so this totals, if you add up the square footage, including the corridors and the men's and ladies' bathrooms, this totals 10,064 square feet, roughly 5,000 square feet per floor. First floor is a little larger than the second floor. If you think back on Banwell's plan, Banwell's expansion is 24,000 square feet. I haven't dug into the analysis as to why there is such a large difference, because this matches all the special needs and teachers, but I think a lot of that 14,000 square foot difference is going to be in the inefficiencies of converting classrooms to administrative space. So my logic is leave the classrooms the way they are and move the administrative special services spaces over to a new addition. Good news is the utilities are stuck to that area, so and the site already has the temporary buildings, so it seems to be a natural location for that addition. Next slide. So I bifurcated it, as I said, into two pieces. There's in the private sector anyway, there's an approach to construction called design build. There are a group of general contractors. Some people like them, some people don't. Design build contractors have their own, either their own in-house architectural group, or they're attached to an architectural group that does their architectural work with them. I talked to two groups. I talked to a general contractor I know pretty well, and I talked to a real estate developer, the head of construction with a large real estate developer. They both gave me a guidance of $450 a foot. That includes hard and soft costs. For the 10,000 square feet, that addition would cost $4.5 million. I then used I used a bunch of AI to get some of these line items to start, and then sent these line items around. Chris helped me out a lot with some of these, and as you can see, I think roofing is at $20 a foot here. A lot of the numbers that I think you'll are somewhat familiar from the Banwell number. I used Banwell where I didn't have any numbers, like the cafeteria expansion. He's showing $1.4 million now. In the last numbers we had, I believe it was $1.2 million. Sorry, can you go back? A couple of strange numbers. And Dan, I don't know if you do a lot of elevator work or not. As a developer, we use a rule of thumb for an elevator like this, $50,000 per stop.
Yeah.
$100,000.
Yes.
Banwell has $360,000 to renovate an existing elevator.
It's about 50 to renovate.
So
No cab.
I'm just looking at these numbers, and it's just like I don't even know how to ask that question. It's 3 times the cost, or in the case of renovating,
Right.
7 times the cost, right? So I know this number is a bit startling. I actually think there's some actually room in this to actually improve this. I think Chris was appropriately said, Luke, you got to add general conditions, you got to add contingency. Are you going to use a general contractor to do the renovation or not? But this was an exercise to say, if we keep the classrooms, and you build the special services as the addition, can you save any money? Is this a more cost-efficient way? And just by doing this exercise and coming in under 24 million, and they're at 38, and he got into the 20s by eliminating the cafeteria. The cafeteria's in here. By eliminating classrooms, we've got the 34 classrooms. I think the committee ought to think about, and where I'm going with this, you can go to the next slide, no need to go through the detail, is we need to decide on a building plan direction. I know a lot of years have gone into the current plan with Banwell, and if the committee decides, look, let's go with Banwell's, let's build the 11 classrooms, I'll go along, but I just think fundamentally, if numbers like that show up, where it's 2/3 of the cost of what Banwell's talking about, there's got to be a better way. And so what I would encourage is let's decide on a plan direction. I think we should interview right away. Let's identify March as the goal to get Kate and this bond issue approved. How do we, with that end in mind, how do we get there? And if we take this path, I think we can actually do some of this construction next summer, not the fall of 2026. I think the summer of 25. I think we can replace the boilers. I think we can do the HVAC. I think we can do a lot of this core work in the summer of 25 if we are aggressive in terms of how we want to go about this.
Maybe difficult to
Waited
get
6 years.
mechanical equipment in time, though.
Oh, yeah, it's gonna require, you know, can we get it ordered and all that stuff, and you're right. Strategy would be, interview, pre-development construction managers, as I've talked about. We recommend, and the school board hires the CM. I've got that next steps, which is in September. CM would engage subcontractors. $20 a foot for roofing is foreign to me. I'm paying $12 a foot. Now, I tend to deal with larger buildings, but that's a lot of money. What I would like to see is to have the construction manager bring in contractors that do, like Down, that just do HVAC, roofers that just do roofing, painters, flooring, windows. Do we need to replace all the windows, or are half the windows good, or is it just caulking? Bring in contractors that have that specific expertise, and really drill down on those line items. This might be, to me, might be the most important step. If we can identify and estimate these costs, I think a really good thing for this committee would be to deliver to the school committee an a la carte approach to this project. In other words, if the total numbers come in at 35 million or 25 million or whatever the numbers are, can we identify the line items such that the school board is then allowed to size the bond issue to get something done in March, but in a size that they believe will pass? Right? I don't think that's our job. I don't think our job is to say, oh, the town won't accept X, right? I think our job is to serve up a cost-efficient plan, and I think in an a la carte line item basis, so that Sophie and everybody can the school board with the administration can decide, okay, what's our absolute priority, right? And rank those priorities and try and size that bond to get it passed.
Yeah, I mean, I think the a la carte can work to some degree.
To some degree.
With large items, the
Yes.
entry, the
Yes.
front site work, cafeteria expansion.
Right, do you
But-
really, right,
but,
rank them?
It's.
Some of these are must-do.
You can't have 25 choice, a la
No,
carte choices.
no. And maybe there's only 8 or 10,
Right,
right?
okay.
Maybe there's 5.
Right.
But at least, maybe we can get them to, here's 15 that you have to do, and then here's option on 10.
Right, I mean, the challenge with getting, to get multiple proposals from CMs at this point is you need a scope. What are we gonna ask them to do? Will Banwell revise their drawings to provide, the concept level plans on
What we wanna do, what the committee wants
What we
to do.
wanna do.
Yeah.
And use that as a basis to have a couple CMs put together
A
a
proposal
budget.
for-
You don't really even need to hire them per se, but maybe you pay 2 or 3 CMs to do conceptual budgeting, schematic budgeting. Some of them may not even charge you.
Wouldn't
We'll
you
do
wanna
it at no
walk-
cost sometimes.
Wouldn't you wanna walk a roofer in here? Wouldn't you wanna walk a down?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what the CM would do, is they would probably use a lot of their cost history, but use subcontractors in key positions.
And they would do that without being
Well,
hired as the key guy?
it depends.
Okay.
It depends.
Okay.
But you could get a proposal,
Right.
give us a price for, a concept level estimate and value engineering.
Yeah.
I call it a 6-month, enlistment.
Yeah.
Engagement.
Yeah, contract.
And they would provide, hours invested and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I think it's definitely worthwhile. I think there is a danger that we get too tight on the numbers at this phase and then fail when the final numbers come in. So you do have to be a bit conservative at this stage. We don't want to lie to ourselves, convince ourselves that it's less than it
Right.
should be.
Yeah.
Or,
Well, you've done it.
or could be.
You did that with me on my budget.
Yeah.
So I get it, and I agree with you. I mean, we want to have, you don't want to be wrong in March. That's for sure.
Well, I think to some degree, and when I was listening to Mike's last presentation, this just struck me as interesting. There were a couple comments made. One, he said most bond submittals fail in the state of New Hampshire. And if you think about what they put forth with their pricing in that original proposal, you can see why. Through further discussion, we pulled $12 million out of the job just without doing anything. And if you're asking questions throughout the course of this or doing some basic analysis just on raw numbers, you can see where the approach is somewhat flawed. And so I question the same thing. I feel like, who's the chicken and who's the egg in this situation? Because that's our responsibility. That's our due diligence to put forth an appropriate sequence so people can make an informed decision. The other thing that, and to some degree, we cannot do, and that's why the collective is here, is make an informed decision in areas where we are not experts. So I also think that it's important in putting together this package that we define the reasons why these things need to happen. Because how else are we going to choose between an a la carte type package or something where we are not informed, where I'm going to advocate for something because I see something in here versus the education is going to advocate for something because they're living with something every day that they have to deal with. And I think that's really the balance of all of this. And I like this approach for that reason, is because it allows for proper visibility and information for us to then be able to, share that knowledge with others. Because again, all they're going to see is 28 million. They're going to say, no, I'm not doing that, right? But what's behind the 28 million and the reasons why? I mean, based on what Mike just put together, I'll go sign off on the $5 million fundamental system improvement right now. Like, to me, those things cannot go another season. That's just from my perspective, right? But then there's other things in there that I haven't been in here in the middle of summer when it's 90 degrees and whatever, and you're trying to get people to focus, And that's got to be almost impossible, not just for the kids, but for the teachers, right? No one's providing a quality experience in that environment. So I don't know. That's just where I'm at with some of the, just listening to all of this. That's just where I'm at with with kind of how we should offer this.
I mean, I guess what worries me a little bit about this is we're going to the town with concept level numbers. I don't know, what's the aversion to hiring the architect to produce 75% drawings and working through the budgeting with real drawings and real scope? I mean, I think, do we need to replace the doors? I don't know. If you bring a door guy in here, he's going to say yeah. But, I mean, you really need an architect and hardware consultant to go through here and say, yeah, based on the current codes, you need to do X, Y, and Z. This is just an example with your doors, frames, and hardware. Yes, the doors are in decent enough shape. You can put new hardware. But for us, in this strategy, we're just kind of taking a wild-ass guess. Yeah, we don't need doors. Whereas, in fact, you may, because what's going to drive the scope is a code analysis with a certain level of renovation, construction value versus, value of the building, at least in Massachusetts. Once you exceed a certain threshold, you have to bring the whole building up to current codes. That has a spiderweb effect. And we don't know that. The only people that are going to know that is an architect, a code consultant. So I think it's important to get that level of research done as part of the pricing exercise, or before the pricing exercise, so that we go through, so that we're asking the CM to get a pricing on a realistic scope. The architect needs to crawl through this building and identify as much of the scope that has to be done. that we can get on that list and get proper pricing. Otherwise, we're a bit blind and optimistic.
They always do
before-
that. That's always part of the architectural responsibility, to bring in a code consultant. They may have one on board, and then do a code analysis.
All right, so before we kind of get into the weeds of next steps, Luke, are you done with your
Yeah,
presentation?
I just had a next steps, but it's somewhat redundant to this, plan direction, CMs, what have you. So this is, you all got a copy of this from,
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Before we all jump in, I just want to give Paul an opportunity to speak it. Paul, do you have anything to say at this point?
Paul, do you have anything to say?
might be on mute.
You're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so I listened to both. I guess I would summarize this way. I like Luke's approach. I like the a la carte approach. Pretty sure you're not going to get the money to go out and get construction documents. I wouldn't even go down that path. Okay, so you have to work around that. Scope. I mean, the construction manager, when we work with the construction manager to develop the scope, I mean, I guess I'm pretty simple about this, but isn't Luke's plan pretty much a scope?
No.
We have to flesh it out. Then we take that and flesh it out. Well, let me give you an example. Doors. We just spent $50,000 for new door locks. Did we just waste $50,000? No. I mean, I like the plan of leaving the building as is as much as we can, and adding a small addition later on. Why don't we go down that path?
Chris, have you ever seen a CM work with a code consultant?
Not typically.
Okay.
Not typically.
But they're also responsible to be knowledgeable of code. I mean, I do design build work all the time, and if I'm not knowledgeable of code, I can't advise somebody appropriately.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to it. ADA codes, building codes, energy codes. I think,
Yeah, and I would just say that everybody in their own right, that's where the subject matter expert would play the role. I'm not gonna come advise on building construction code, but I can certainly tell you all about HVAC code.
yeah, I mean, a construction manager's not obligated to be up on all the codes. The architect is.
And can the CM bring in, you say if you bring in a door guy, he's gonna tell you need all new doors. I don't know, Dan, you got door guys. My sense would be you got a couple of door guys. I mean, I would think we're gonna flush out the guys going, oh yeah, you need all new doors.
Yeah.
I think, can the CM bring in 2 or 3 subs to, bring in the contract, and then I think the right answer will flush out. Are they competent on the code side, as Ryan is saying?
If it's repair work and, updating, no problem. If it has anything to do with structural, ventilation, any kind of codes that resolve around safety, big problems, because whoever makes that decision is liable for millions.
Well, I guess
You gotta be
just,
careful.
I mean, all of the major projects in Stratham have gone through that pathway. Hire the architect, 75% drawings, do budgeting through that process of design. Then you get your final budget at 75% drawings, and that's the number you take to the board. That way you have all that time through the design and the budgeting process for both documenting what's required and proving it out through pricing.
so I was just gonna suggest maybe one alternative consideration. 'Cause Mike made a comment when he started talking. He said, we work for you guys. And I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, I'd be pretty pissed off if this thing went somewhere else after 6 years of work, or however long they've been working on this. So, maybe is there another approach? Because they've already put together a pretty robust a la carte line item sheet. So is there a way we just set more clear expectations for them, so that way they can work to achieve what we need from a taxpayer, fiscal responsibility standpoint, from an educational needs standpoint, and put some of those things together to then give us something that's not I guess, hypothetical, because even in some of their numbers, he stated that there's probably more we can do here. So what is that? And does that include maybe a redesign consideration? I know they put together, a couple different phases and you guys have had a lot more discussion about this already. But if ultimately the impetus is cost, and then, okay, you guys need to go back. If you want to continue to work on this, here's your goal. Go figure out how to make this happen.
I think that could be a smart approach.
So can I add to that real quick?
Yeah, please.
So when Paul and I were on a call with Mike on Friday, he showed us the breakdown of that new proposal. That's exactly what he said we would do. So if this committee came up with a number, here's where we're at, go back and dig in based on these numbers, they would give you a new scope of work based on what you want. So we want the new boilers, we want the new HVAC, we want 4 new classrooms. They will build a scope for that and then price it out to you to come back and look at within the budget that you're looking at. So when he said that he would do that, that is exactly what the approach that he would want. And that's basically what they've been hired to do, to get you to a point that you can feel comfortable with a budget to be able to present it to the board.
So I have a question. First of all, an observation. Chris, when we were on the phone with Mike and the president of Gamble, I think they said in their entire history they never had a town pay for construction documents. Is that right? Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, so Ingrid Nichols, who's the president of Banwell, they've done over 100 renovations for schools across the state. This is the approach they do. They do not do full construction documents ahead of time because that would be a $300,000 to $500,000 bond first. And because we don't get state aid. Massachusetts does get state aid, which usually takes that. So it would be bonded by the town of Stratham, and then you'd come back for the full cost, another bond of what it would be. So it'd be back-to-back bonds for that extended period of time, however many years you pick it for, that you'd be paying money, one, for the documents, say 500,000, and then 20 million for whatever project you have. You have 2 bonds going on at the same time. So that's why they do a large scope. Then they dig into it once that bond is passed with your construction manager, with your firms, and digging down and getting that price point down even further.
Okay, so for speaking for myself, I would vote no to go to the town for construction documents. No, speaking for myself. Okay, so the other thing is, why don't we give Luke's plan to Banwell and say, this is the way we want to do it, and this is the maximum amount of money we want to spend.
Yeah, I think that's, I was just going to say, Kate, I would love to hear from you and your thoughts on.
Not to exceed.
And by the way, I want to make something else clear. My opinion, and this is just my experience in 50 years of trying to get business. You have customers and everything. That someone mentioned Banwell's going to be pretty upset. Respectfully, I'm sorry. That's the risk of being in the free market enterprise. If they're upset because we go somewhere else, if it's too hot, get out of the kitchen. If they give us what we want, they check all the boxes otherwise. But
Yeah.
I'm not making decisions because they get upset.
We just haven't been involved in any of the discussions, so just trying to be fair to the process.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Kate, I would.
no, I absolutely want to be fair to them. I say I like Luke's plan, okay, because it is the least, to me anyways, it's the least invasive. I like keeping the school as is as much as possible. Okay, it's solid, it's not falling down. And everybody agrees we have major systems that need to be replaced. That's not an issue, okay? So that goes into the scope. Everyone agrees we want to do as much as we can to condition the air, and I use that term loosely, condition the air in the school as best we can. So that goes into the scope. I think most people agree increasing the size of the cafeteria. I got a real appreciation for that when we toured the cafeteria, and I learned that the cafeteria is used for much more than lunch. So I think a lot of people could appreciate that expanding the cafeteria is something that is high on the list, and so on and so forth. So I don't know. I guess I'm just a simple man. I don't know why we can't put together a scope, and the scope is done, and give it back to Banwell. say, we want to spend X million of dollars, here's our scope, marry these two up as best you can, let's move forward. Let's get this done for March. I do not want to be going to the town for a bond to build this thing in 2026. And I apologize, I'm short. As some people know, I'm in South Korea. I think I've slept about 5 hours in the last 4 days. So,
Doesn't sound good.
just not in the best frame of mind. But okay, I said my piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, Kate, I would love to hear from you what your thoughts and reactions are on Luke's plan. Would that work for you and the needs of the school and kids? Yeah, what would you like?
I feel like I would need more time to process it. Like hearing Luke talk about it and look at it, and I don't want to have like a gut reaction or not a really thoughtful response to that. Because I feel like it was a ton of work. Thank you. Like super appreciative, and I appreciate the way you presented it because it was helping me digest what I was trying to review. And Paul, I also understand your desire to say like, here's kind of a dollar figure, like get us closer to this by hearing the things that are most important to us as both a committee and as a school board. I appreciate that. The piece for me is there has to be more consideration about the impacts of education on the decisions that were in Luke's proposal, and I wouldn't expect you to have that lens. For example, the occupational therapy is heavily accessed by our youngest students. And in this design, it's far away from them, which creates problems for delivering our services to students, which are required by law. So there's like those things that I think we just have to have further conversation about. Similarly, the health office, as you know, services 500 kids. We have one bed. The state expectations that we have an isolation room. I mean, there are things that we just don't have. And in order to do that and create it in that space, you are going to have to restructure the main office. Additionally, when we think about locating all of the related services together.
Pull your mic a little bit.
Yep.
I don't think Paul can hear you.
Paul, can you hear me if I talk that loud?
You woke him up.
I do have a teacher voice, I promise.
I didn't get all of what you said. I got some of what you said. And this is where, you know, some compromise comes in. I mean, so Luke gave his plan, and he didn't specifically know the things you're talking about with the nurse's office and beds and things like that. And this is where, you know, that conversation occurs. And I'm just sorry, Luke, I'm picking on you. Luke goes back to the drawing board and says, okay, let's see if we can make some changes to better accommodate, you know, the needs as outlined by Kate. But Luke, correct me if I'm wrong. What you showed tonight did not take into consideration some of the things that Kate just said.
Yeah, I just made a basic assumption. I said, let's provide all of the space that Kate has outlined. And I think I got pretty close to that. What Kate needs to absorb and think through is the proximity of those and she points out, and she absolutely points.
It's almost like, hey, Luke, you know, have a meeting with Kate, sit down, look at all the papers, let's, you know, start taking out a pencil, marking things up, and see if we can get a little closer to what Kate needs. Right now, you've just gone on a square foot basis.
Yeah, that's right. And it did fall short on the nursing side. Added one office by pulling the special ed administration and director out of the central office up into the new wing. But Kate just needs to absorb that and try and look at, and maybe there's a hybrid between the two. I don't know, but is there something that she can think through? She's got two different ideas here, and can she combine them in some way?
Yeah, I think there's so earlier in, I want to say May, I met with Sophie and Paul and Chris, and they asked us again to go through and really be intentional about things that we thought might be able to be combined into one space to be more efficient with space. Originally, the plan said 6 classrooms for kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. We reduced those to 5 classrooms instead. So we did do that in May. I met with Brad, and he took all of those ideas and reproduced a whole nother scheme that you just saw, because it's exactly what we were trying to do. And that was to say, like, How do we take what was currently laid out as classrooms and make them smaller office spaces, or put the art, there was a kiln storage space. We currently have one for the art room, but it was going to be in its own bigger space so we could utilize it in a different way. Nope, we're going to cut that down. So we did do some of that. I feel like given the level of knowledge that Banwell and EI have about our building right now and the schemes, if you as a committee were like, here are the things, like you just said, a 10,000 square foot addition rather than, I feel like Brad and I could sit and say, okay, we know this about where the speech offices need to be. We know OT needs to be really close to preschool. We know preschool needs to be really close to a second playground, like all of the things that are sort of requirements and expectations. If we're thinking about special ed space, we know that we need to have confidentiality when we're doing testing. That's something we don't have right now. Like they'll come and take my office and I just don't have an office for a day. So those are the things that we know that we can look at and try to honor what your plan proposed, Luke, but also then addressing some of the educational needs that you wouldn't have had the expertise to include in your plans. I feel like that's a really rational next step. I do have general concerns for timeline, in all fairness to everybody at this table and to fairness to Banwell, and I just think I want to be incredibly thoughtful, because I keep hearing this like, what Kate needs, it is not what I need. It has never been what I need. It has been a board's prerogative. I happen to be the building principal and the expert in education, but those are also based on regulations and policy and protocol. And I just don't want that to get lost. And I really, if in fact it's going to be like what Kate needs, then I want to be real thoughtful if my name's going to be sitting somewhere.
I was using that, I should have said the school and the teachers and everything.
Everybody does it. Everybody, and that was not directed at you, Luke. Everybody does it. I just want to be, I am the educational leader, I am the principal, and I want to be incredibly thoughtful and respectful of what the children and the teachers need and our families and residents. So I just want to be really thoughtful about the timeline. If in fact we're really saying we want to have something that's more a la carte, that we really want to reduce the square footage of a possible renovation and reduce the number of times we disrupt the current structure as is, then I would want to be really, really thoughtful. And this is a really big shift in what the board has wanted over the last 4 years. And that's important to note. So I want to be, again, I'm being redundant. It is important to me to be incredibly
So
specific.
what are you saying the next step is? You getting together with Brad with these plans and your thoughts and maybe coming up with some combination or changes? I think that's a great idea.
I guess I'm saying if the board, if you guys of our committee have really said like,
The next step.
Yeah.
I mean, the addition's gonna go right up against the existing building. He
Right.
just drew it separately.
Right.
It really is right next to
Kindergarten and first
kindergarten
grade.
and
so I guess what I guess what I would offer is if you guys have been really clear about, we want to keep the structure as is as much as possible because it really reduces renovation costs, because the bones we know are really good of this building. But we also know we do need roughly, thank you. We also know we need roughly 10,000 square feet of space, additional space.
I think so.
It might not be that the Scheme 3 actually puts the renovation out there. They may say, let's talk about the front of this building, because then you're centralizing the health office, then you're centralizing special ed and occupational therapists. I don't know. I don't know what that's going to be. And that's why I feel like if you're really clear as a committee, like these are the things we want as a parameters and guidelines, I feel like going back to the people that know our building the best now, without specific numbers, because I feel like that's a piece that's really been unclear. I would love that opportunity to do that, because I think that what I'm hearing is there's a real concerted effort here to do, that would be a natural next step.
Yeah, I would say it's critical to keep the existing building as untouched as possible, because that's going to not just reduce construction costs, it's going to reduce construction time, which translates into more cost. It comes into scheduling. To be able to complete, the interior sections over the summer will be key. And if we can do that, you're going to save a lot of money and a lot of aggravation.
And I think I heard Brad say that the fewer number of times that you touch any load-bearing wall, the better, because it essentially creates a little bit of, I don't want to call it weakness, but if you keep those all the way they are more structurally sound for the long term, right? I think that's what I heard Brad saying.
Well, he was saying that there may be a non-bearing masonry wall, but it still provides structure to the building.
Okay. So let's not touch them if we don't have to. That would be that teacher understanding.
I think,
I have a question. So just as a suggestion for next steps, because we got about a half hour left, and I will want to, have everybody's time to get us going so that we'd have something for the next meeting. If there was, this committee could recommend what we want, like we want the HVAC in this, we want these systems, and we want 10,000 square feet. We can bring that back, Kate, Tim, Sophie, myself, and Paul, meet with the architect, get that going, and then have a redesign come here with a cost, so you could see that all. Then you'd see the number with the scheme put in place, and then that would be a bit of the ability to start the next step with the true numbers. Is this still where we're at with the numbers?
Yeah, I would recommend the next step be more of a plan exercise. What Kate is describing is a plan exercise between herself and Brad and whoever else you need in that, right? A plan exercise. And keep everything in there, right? I would not start cutting. I would not say, okay, let's eliminate the cafeteria.
We just need to know a number, though, so that he
Right,
knows where.
right.
Yeah.
I would keep everything because that's what I started out with. I said, we're going to keep everything that, now, it was certainly weak on the health center side, right? But I think that should be the exercise,
Yeah,
really a plan approach.
Right, I agree. Keep new windows,
Yeah,
new
for
roof.
now.
I mean, I look at it as we need to be good for the next 30 years.
Right.
I mean, if we pass a $25 million bond and then 5 years later, we've got to put new windows in, we really haven't done a good job.
Agreed. We do not want to have to do
But if
that.
the
I've been
windows
in
are
towns that
good-
have done that.
But if the windows are
The windows
good.
are good, the windows stay.
Right.
Maybe
Well,
we
the
just
same
need new
conversation
glass. I don't know.
You have the same roof concerns too.
Right.
Now's the time to look
Yeah,
at it in depth.
10 years is a blink of an eye.
Mm-hmm.
By the time this job gets done, it's going to be 5 years left on the roof.
So, Chris, what do
All
you
gonna be
need right
retired
now
somewhere
from
else.
us?
Yes, sir.
Chris Andruski.
Yes, sir.
So, meeting with Banwell again. Why don't we have Banwell come in and the exercise that you're talking about, developing the scope, why don't we do it with the whole subcommittee? The subcommittee are the construction experts. They have relevant input. I know
So,
it's a big group, but why don't we do that?
because when we're looking at the building, if we know what we're looking for, it's about educational space of where we would want to suggest that. Not to exclude anybody here, but putting all special education in one wing would never be something I would advocate for because you're segregating kids, so that would be a hard pass. Putting OT on the second floor is a hard pass because kindergarten kids can't go upstairs. So to do the exercise of educational programming with the space, that needs to be a Kate, Tim, Chris, Sophie conversation. Then when we're talking about what are the scopes to the HVAC, that's where I want Ryan to come in. When we're talking about roofing, that's where I want Dan and other people to have that input. So I think that first exercise, Paul, has to be done by the education experts, and then we bring it to the committee to say, are these numbers in line with what you've been seeing in your work? That would be my suggestion from years of experience.
I don't disagree with that. I understand exactly what you're saying, but I think it would be good experience for one or more of these gentlemen and ladies to listen into that conversation and understand the thought process of where it all came from.
So you are the chair, you can design it however you would like, Paul. I'm just giving a simple recommendation of how I would propose it and have done it 15 years, but that is, we take the direction from you.
Okay, I'd like to talk with Sophie about that later on.
Sure.
I do have questions.
One last question. Just to make sure that I understood this, I was listening to Chris Merrick and to Luke. If you went the route of hiring a construction manager, did I understand, or did I misunderstand? Don't they have architects, in-house architects typically, and wouldn't they know code? Wouldn't that make them liable and responsible to make sure that the building is built correctly?
Not necessarily.
No.
Not necessarily.
No, they're independent from the architect typically, and you actually want that independence, Paul. You want a construction guy or gal to be, a balance with the architect.
They do provide a great checks and balance. Yeah.
All right, Kate, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just think we need to be really cognizant. And again, I'm going back to like timeline. I just think that's a really, and I know Chris and I want to make sure we have like to pull that together with Brad being thought. I think Brad's on vacation this week. So like those things, I'm just thinking about us making a decision tonight that would inform so we know how quickly we need to turn that around with Brad is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, and I would just, reflect on the middle school project again, because yes, I hear that timing is important. It took them 4 years to even get to a place to where someone would agree, to where the town would agree to next steps. So I just think that's just something to keep out there in terms of what we're doing here. And, you know, I don't know, Paul, if you have any insight, but into what the appetite is, but I think Chris made a comment about, let's give them some, you know, not to exceed direction. And I also like the approach of don't take anything out and see where it comes, right? And then what do we kind of work backwards from that list now, you know, but taking the must-do things. And it's not just must-do things from, you know, building upgrades, but it's must-do things from the whole package perspective.
All right, so,
I had a very difficult time hearing what Kate was saying and what Ryan was saying, but I can catch up, you know, later on when I get back.
all right, I'm trying to think of like how to, what should we say for next steps are? It sounds to me like we need to have a meeting with Banwell, another meeting as soon as possible, and do another, another reiteration. And
I think you do.
Yeah.
You do.
yeah, not the whole subcommittee,
Yes, yes.
but just Paul, myself, Chris, and Kate probably.
I think Tim would probably be, Tim Harrington,
Tim.
the facilities
Yep,
director, would
yep.
be
Yeah.
present.
Let's see what you come back with.
Yeah.
Okay, see what we come back with. I mean, I think personally, I feel like the number that I have in my head is around 20 million. Like, I feel like that's kind of the number that is sticking in my head of what I feel comfortable presenting with the town. And from what I heard from people in the town, like that might be palatable. Much more than that, I feel like it's going to get shot down. That's just my gut check from what I've heard from people in town. And Paul and I talked about that. I think that's roughly what we're thinking.
Well, Sophie, we'll talk about that offline, okay?
Okay, sorry, Paul. All right, so next steps, we'll do that. And then there's a board meeting in September. So I don't know if it would be possible to have another subcommittee meeting before that meeting with there's no way.
I don't think I mean, my assumption would be the turnaround with Banwell of having something that was actually like talkable and with talking points before the September 18th would not be possible unless you think otherwise.
No, we pushed the board meeting to September 25th at our board retreat, but still, I would say that first week of October, if we shot for it, we'd be able to get this committee back together with a better scope with numbers.
Yeah, I just think as the significant internal changes could be significant in order to
Right.
make that work.
Okay, so we'll set up a meeting with Banwell ASAP, and then when we have an estimate of when those documents will be, then we'll schedule another subcommittee meeting, or do we want to try and get one on the books now, just so we have,
Let's try and put it on the books.
yeah.
I think we have to.
Okay.
Otherwise we're too busy.
So based on turnaround time from Banwell in the past, do we have a sense of when we could try and schedule a meeting for?
I think Chris is right. The first week of October would probably be reasonable unless, Chris, I think that's what you're thinking, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
if we contact Brad and let him know, we'll share what Luke shared. He has Mike's and how we combine those together to look at a scope and
Yeah.
really walk through it, to have him, usually it's a 2.5 week that he's redrawing it, getting it all there. I think first week of October, we could definitely, hopefully have something, and if not, we will readjust if he says, no, I just won't have it ready.
So we've been meeting on
first of
Mondays and
October,
Tuesdays.
Look, yeah,
That seems to work
Early
well, but
October.
first.
I really can't do Tuesdays because my husband has,
How about Mondays or?
yeah, Monday would be great, if that's
That's
possible, Monday the 30th.
actually.
It'd be the 30th or the 7th.
Or
And
the
if
7th.
Brad's on vacation for a week, that would only give him like 4.5 weeks.
What's that, September 30th?
Yeah, September
or
30th
the
or
se-
Monday the 7th.
Or October 7th.
Anyone have
Either one is fine
conflicts
by me.
of either of those?
I have Brentwood School Board meeting on October 7th, but that, you guys could meet without me if Kate feels comfortable. But I-
Or what was it, October?
Do that?
Do we feel confident that we would
You
have,
guys want that?
have it available by the 30th? Because the sooner the better, if possible.
So I wonder if everybody could reserve both dates on their calendar right now, and I will reach out to Brad tomorrow. I don't know that he will get back to me this week. I think this is the week he's on vacation, but I will at least put the email in his inbox, and then as soon as I hear back, I can send the email to Paul, and Paul say either the meeting is the 30th or the 7th, and Paul will disseminate that information to you because he's the chair.
Great.
What are those dates?
September 30th or October 7th.
So it would be approximately 6 o'clock, 5:30, 6 o'clock,
Should we hold
Yeah.
6, right?
say 6 o'clock.
Doesn't matter to me, but
And they'll, Paul or Sophie will get back to us on what was decided.
Yeah, that sounds
Versus
good.
date.
Is Paul there? Can you do either the 30th or the 7th? I don't know. We can't hear you if you're talking.
I can do the 30th or the 7th.
Okay,
Is
great.
there an objection to a 5:30 start?
If people are struggling with 5:30, okay, push it.
No, they want to do 5:30.
Yeah, 5:30 is better
5:30
for,
would be a preference
great.
for me.
Same.
Good.
I've been here since 4 o'clock.
Can we review back into the timeline as we go to the bond and come, what are we up against on these timelines?
We're up having community forums to be able to get these numbers and the scopes out to different community groups to be able to hear it. Then we got to do any pre-bond work that we'd be looking at to get those numbers so we know how we might want to bond it and what that would be the cost effect over the X amount of time. Those are the two biggest obstacles that we would have.
And Chris, I believe the bond, so where the vote is in, the vote is in March, but I believe it has to be to the state. The bonds have to be written and submitted to, the proper language for the warrant article, rather, has to be submitted to the state, I think in February, right?
Usually we do it in our January meeting.
Okay,
February
so
is the deadline. I think you
Yeah, the
have.
timeline is
first
tight in
Tuesday
terms of the
February.
state knowing exactly what you plan for your warrant articles and your budget, and so there's some deadline well before March, is what I guess I'm trying to say. I don't know the exact dates.
And then, who was it, Chris or Kate, were you saying in our last meeting that there was incentive to not do it next year in 2026, the following year?
So I
Because
want to
there's-
be, what happens in 2026 is the teachers are negotiating a contract. So there will be a separate warrant article for the teachers' contracts that year, which is always a large amount of money the first year because it is when the teachers negotiate. Not a large amount of money, nothing like nothing like this, thank goodness. But it's just separate than the typical operating budget that everybody sees every year, right? That happens about every 4 years. And so that is a part of thing that will be presented to the taxpayers. That being said, if I'm thinking about this from a taxpayer's lens, if this committee and the school board decided to push it off in 26 because it was a chance to really be that much more thoughtful and get the numbers to a much more exact place that was going to do both the facility needs and the academic programming, I would want that as a taxpayer, even if it meant that the two warrants were coming up in the same year, right? Like, I think that knowing that the people that you have in your appointed positions or your elected positions are being that thoughtful, I think is something the board should talk about. I think we really wanted the 20 bond in 25, and I understand all the reasons why. But I'm also hearing, like you said, the community is really, numbers matter. So I think that matters. I think we have
Yeah,
to consider.
and maybe it's, a couple of phases. Maybe we do the, just the basics for this spring and then think forward like, okay, and then what does that extra building look like and take our time on that. That's
I
another.
just want to be
I
really,
mean, I'd be surprised if there's not other funds in the town that are available for boiler replacements and building maintenance issues. I mean, is there any funds that are tapped for that?
We have a repair and maintenance fund, which has got over $200,000 for significant needs if the boiler were to break tomorrow, because it's not covered in our general budget. So that has been added to year after year. Our goal is to get it up over 300,000 for a couple major catastrophes.
So you have 200 now.
200, and we need to put some in that came out of last year's.
I think it was
Not
10.
very
I think there
much.
was just 10 put in.
That's, we've been
You
building.
need it, even with a new building.
And they
It's
don't,
really
they
for,
try
like,
not to touch it
unexpected
if we don't have to, so it keeps
Yeah,
building every
no,
year.
I agree.
That's what's there.
Right, you don't want to be tapping into that unless it's an absolute emergency.
Yep.
I do
right.
think, like you said, you could talk about what Mike talked about in terms of, you could go with like the 500,000 for the things that he mentioned. I think there was like the LED lights, the boiler, or whatever. I have no idea. That's not my area of expertise, like you're saying. And then give yourselves into 26 if
Yeah.
you felt like that was necessary. I would love for us to make some decisions because I feel like this is weighing on everybody. But in terms of decisions, it needs to be really thoughtful.
Okay, great. Any other final comments before we wrap? All right, well, we will be in touch about the next meeting and yay for ending early.
Luke, I really appreciate all that
Thank
work.
you all.
That was
Yeah.
really
Thank you.